Good morning. This is the African teacher, Maurice Odhiambo. Today, 31st of December, the year 2025. Welcome to my review of the events of this year. Today, I want to talk about the Borderless campaign. This campaign is aimed at quickening the process of Africa's integration by mobilizing citizens and by petitioning authorities. Now, the problem with the Borderless Africa campaign is that it is based on the wrong premise. This wrong premise is that the African ruling elites are actually willing participants in the continental integration idea. Researchers have shown right from the 1960s that the African ruling elites are probably the most important hindrance to continental integration. The first reason is very clear. Africa's ruling elites, when they got power in the 1960s, decided that they will defend that power. That became their primary goal. They had inherited power from the colonists, and therefore they saw the international structure to be favorable to their own interests because they had basically inherited power from colonists who were using the power for their own interests. That is the first one. And if you read Professor Issa Shivji, he has really analyzed that angle. But number two, as processes of globalization continued to develop and as Africa became even more marginalized from the so-called international free trade system, African elites found many ways of collaborating with multinational corporations for their own benefit. And therefore, the state continued to become more and more of an apartheid state. Economically, the states in Africa are apartheid states. There is a formal economy in which the elites and their collaborators take part, and there is the informal economy in which most of the citizens eke out a living, of course, apart from the agricultural subsistence agriculture and so on and so forth. So the ruling elites are the primary cause of the stagnation of this process, of course, accompanied by the interests of foreign states and multinational corporations. I want to read for you a paragraph from the book Afro-Regions, The Dynamics of Cross-Border Micro-Regionalism in Africa. This is a book by Soderbaum and Taylor, two of the most important intellectuals in this field of new regionalism. In other words, instead of investing in regional projects that promote broad-based development and a regional collective good, the ruling elites will much more likely seek to control what material benefits of state sovereignty they can master to strengthen their own political authority, as well as to benefit personally, often financially. This helps explain in part why so many regional projects fail in Africa. They simply do not personally benefit the elites in charge, and thus such rulers rapidly lose interest in promoting regional integration. What remains in such circumstances are often ad hoc arrangements, invariably financed by the donor community. These arrangements are then mediated by and through external attempts to encourage reform. In fact, globalization is not forced on the African elites. It is their avenue to wealth. What is forced on the African elites is actually the idea of integrating the continent. This is also why the problem of non-tariff barriers cannot disappear, because it is their own collaborators within the state system who pressure them to maintain these non-tariff barriers, but they are also part and parcel of those businesses. Therefore, they are direct beneficiaries of non-tariff barriers. In the East African community, non-tariff barriers will never disappear because non-tariff barriers are there to serve the interests of the ruling elites. I think what I can say to the colleagues in the Borderless Africa campaign is that this is an excellent campaign. It's good to mobilize citizens for this purpose, but it can only succeed if it is logically part of a broader strategy, not as the key strategy itself. Because from what I've told you, from my own studies of integration, African elites are not interested. And unless the pressure becomes existential, unless the pressure builds up so that they sense that they can lose power if they do not integrate the continent, then it will never succeed.